Attract the One, Chapter 2. Every love story is beautiful, but mine is my favorite. I could probably just tell you the whole story without reading it because I love this story. It's my favorite one. But I'm going to read it anyway because I don't want to miss any of the best parts. I could probably just tell you this whole story and without even reading the book, but I'm still going to read it because I don't want to miss any details. July 13th, 2013. I attended a beautiful wedding in Montana. The groom's father was this giant man, this former NFL coach, gave the toast, and he said, "You think you love her now? Just wait 47 years, and you'll love her more than you'll ever know." I was like, did he really just say that? Someone can really feel that way after 47 years? And that night, I bawled myself to sleep. I wanted what she had. I wanted a husband who would say those words about me in 47 years when I'm gray and wrinkly and my boobs are sagging down to my waist. And on the plane ride home, the first thing I did was write a list of all the things that I wanted to do for myself. I decided to spend my time and energy on becoming the person that I would want to marry. And I got busy. A year later, I went to a monthly business meeting. One of the people attending, Mr. John Stanley, had been my client for about 6 years. While we were setting up for the meeting, he mentioned casually that he was dating again and that women were crazy. I didn't ask him why he thought he was attracting crazies. He showed me a picture of one woman he'd gone out with. She had a certain unhappy energy to her. I can't remember what I said to him, but I was thinking negative, Red Roger. He shared stories with me about going to dinner at a restaurant with his teenage daughter, Peyton, where gold-digging cougars, he didn't call them that, I did, would come right up to him asking if they could sit in his lap next to him, where there were 10 empty bar stools on either side of him. I told him that was gross. You don't want women who are that aggressive. And I remember him looking at me like in bewilderment. I remember the feeling that I had when he was talking about dating. I felt protective. I knew that he was a great man, and I didn't want women who can spot a Rolex from 5 miles away taking advantage of him. After that meeting, I went to lunch with my coworkers who both said, "You should date John Stanley." And I told them I really didn't think I was his type, which I assumed was a short blonde with big boobs. There I am. I'm 5'10", Amazon brunette, raising 2 young children. I didn't think he was my type either, because my, quote, type had always been massive, football player, wrestler, big as a fridge type. I finally realized why that was, because huge men made me look smaller. Ladies, how is that type of yours working out for you? Your, quote, type is just a pattern and nothing else. Being insecure about my size led me to believe that I needed to be with a massive man to feel beautiful. I had spent my life wanting to be skinny and petite. It's not going to happen, and it doesn't matter. That inner bitch still pops up here and there telling me I'm big and my thighs need to come down. It's usually the 2 days before my period starts. But I use my tools to make her shut up. John, on the other hand, he's 6'2" and 160 pounds. Yes, I weigh more than he. In case you've ever wondered if God has a sense of humor. John's in great shape. He's just skinny. I try to fatten him up, but it doesn't work. I feed him constantly, and it still doesn't work. He's also 19 years older than me. I had never dated anyone significantly older than I. And so while I didn't think he was my, quote, type, I'd known him professionally for a long time. I always thought of him as a great man. He always opened my door when I got out of my car or returned to my car after a meeting. He was just a gentleman. He did that for everyone, not just me. He always grabbed whatever I was holding, and he would carry things inside for me when I was coming from meetings. He always took time out of his day to talk if I ever came by. I never would stop by, but when I had an appointment with him, he would always just drop everything as soon as I came down and give me his full attention. That was really rare in my business. One time, right after his workplace was remodeled, he took me on a tour of the new facility. He's probably the only person on the planet who walks faster than I do. And I almost had to run to keep up with him. It was hilarious. I felt it was so thoughtful of him to take the time to show me around when he had this huge business to run. He was so busy. And he never acted like I was inconveniencing him. We never thought of each other in a romantic way at all. We had never even gone to lunch. Typically, I do take my clients to lunch all the time, but I thought he was a workaholic and he wouldn't want to go. I was mostly right. We had monthly marketing meetings with a group of dealerships located in the same auto mall, and John was always the first one there. And therefore, my coworkers and I got to talk with him the most. And I felt like I knew his whole family. He always told me stories about Peyton, who was gorgeous and super talented. She sang the national anthem at nearly 100 professional basketball and baseball games since she was 8 years old. Before meetings, we'd watch videos of her singing on YouTube, and he'd tell me stories about his vacations in Prescott, where once it snowed so much that their SUV got stuck down the street from their house. He told me about his son, Connor, who had just started college in San Diego and was so smart that it seemed like he has a photographic memory. I'm pretty sure he does. John obviously loved his children. He was always telling me stories, and I'd always thought to myself, I want to marry someone like John Stanley. It was a bit of a surprise to hear he was separated, but I really didn't think much of it after that day. So later that year, months later, right before Thanksgiving, I realized at the last minute that I would be alone for the holiday. My parents had gone to Utah. My sister had gone somewhere with her boyfriend. My kids were going to be with their dad. So I called my friend and invited myself to her Thanksgiving dinner. This is the friend that had recently gotten married. During dinner, everyone around the table took turns saying what we were grateful for. I said to my friend's husband, Bill, I am grateful for you. You showed me that real love is possible. You showed me that there are men who are kind and considerate, and I want that. You showed me that there are men who want a long-term, committed, soulmate marriage, who cherish and adore their wives. And I'm so grateful for that, because seeing their love with my own eyes helped me to get on the path that ultimately led me to John. It started with them. I saw it for myself, and I started believing that it was possible. Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, it's a big sales event for everybody, but especially my dealer group. And the Saturday morning after Black Friday, I went to the dealerships like I did every year to see how the event had gone. I gathered their reports and say hi to everybody. And when I got to the Toyota store where John was the general manager, I couldn't find him right away. So I went up to the front desk, got the materials, said hi to the rest of the managers, and asked them if they knew where John was. They said, he's around here somewhere. I made one more loop around the showroom, and just when I was about to leave, I saw him sitting at a desk talking to customers. And he jumped out of his seat and greeted me. He's like, oh, sit down, sit down, sit down. And we sat at a table, and we just chatted about everything: skincare, alkaline water, greens. We're talking about diet. We're talking about fitness. We're talking about food, just everything. It was so funny. We even talked about his dating life. He showed me photos of a couple of the women that he had spent time with. He said he had dated a couple of women of different ages, but had found no one that he really liked. And he expressed to me he wasn't sure what age he was looking for, like somewhere in their 30s, somewhere in their 50s, and everything in between. John told me about one date that was okay, but upon entering the woman's house, he was disgusted. He said there was a thick layer of dust on every shelf. And I immediately made a mental note to go home and double check my bookshelves. Those kind of details are not really on my radar. Then we started talking about Thanksgiving. On the same day that I was with my friend and her family, John was with his dear friends of 30 years. He told me about these two families and how they made dueling turkeys, and both families have had loving marriages for over 30 years, incredible children and grandchildren, and enjoy each other's friendships. And he told me until that day, he thought he had only been looking for a playmate. Now, when he tells the story, I beg him to use a different word than playmate. He thought he only wanted someone to hang out with, like go to the movies with, ride bikes with, or hike with. After 20-something years of marriage, he was just looking for a friend, someone to do things with. But after that Thanksgiving dinner, he got into his car and drove home alone, and he actually said, God, I'm ready to fall in love. Mind you, John was saying those words to me in the middle of his dealership in one of the busiest days of the year. And my response burst right out of me. And I said, you should. You're awesome. You deserve love. You deserve to be in love, John. And he goes, well, you did it. And I replied, me? Oh, no, I'm not dating anybody. He thought I had a boyfriend. I said, oh, we broke up. He was much younger than me. Oh. He goes, how old was he? And I go, 32. And I'm about to turn 40. I had never dated anyone younger than me before. And John goes, well, what is your age range then? And I said, like your age. And he gave me this look of bewilderment again. Then it was time to go. He walked me out to my car and opened my door. And I remember being embarrassed by the garbage that was in the car door. When I got home, I immediately cleaned my car. I removed every book from the shelves, dusted every inch of every bookshelf in my home because I had never thought about like the bookshelves, I spent the rest of the weekend just cleaning. And I wasn't cleaning for him. He had made me aware of some other ways that I could be more cleanly. The next night, I got a text from John sitting on my friend's couch watching National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation while the kids were making gingerbread houses. I looked down at my phone. I see John Stanley had sent me a text, and he had never sent me a text before. I said aloud, John Stanley is texting me, even though no one in the room knew who he was or why that would be a big deal. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember exactly where I was sitting, and I remember exactly sitting there opening my phone and seeing it. It's like it was yesterday. It was 10 years ago. And it was the text was something generic, just saying hi. I can't remember exactly what it said. But reading it, I began to feel scared of him liking me. Like, what if he actually does like me because he's my client? And that was typically a disaster waiting to happen. And so I replied and asked him if he had a hot date that night. And he said, no. He said, everyone thinks I have this, crazy, wild, social life. But he's like, I work. I usually get a rotisserie chicken on my way home, and I watch Netflix and I go to bed. And I said, that sounds terrible. And why are you working on a Sunday? You need to take a day off. Do something fun. Like, you don't really have to work 7 days a week. So a few hours later, he texted again saying that he had left work and he was going home early. And he said, I guess I just needed someone to make me leave. That was so funny. 2 days went by, and Tuesday night, he texted me again with his sales numbers for the month. He said that it had been an awesome weekend, and he thanked me for helping him. And none of my clients ever did that, by the way. Then came the ask. He gave me 97 ways to say no. It went something like this. I don't know if you can get a babysitter or have plans already, or if you want to go to a game, if you like football, you need to wash your hair, if you get a babysitter, if you have nothing to wear. But I have tickets to the Cardinals game this Sunday, and I'd like you to come with me. And I immediately texted my business partner because I said, John Stanley just asked me out. What do I do? And she immediately responded, yes, go for it. I mean, if you want to. He's a total gentleman, and even if it doesn't work out, you would never hold it against us or jeopardize our business. And I remember thinking, yes, that's for sure true. I responded to John, sure, I'd love to go. He replied, I also have tickets to Fleetwood Mac on Tuesday. I don't know if you like them, if you like classic rock, if you'd like to go and get a babysitter. But even if we end up being friends after the Cardinals game, or just being friends, I still would like you to go with me if you want to. He was asking me out on the second date before we even got on the first one. I was dying. I thought it was so hilarious and so adorable. And John was obviously just completely oblivious about the quote rules, right? He didn't even know there was a rule book. And that made me love him even more. I mean, how many times have we been on dates and they're just playing by the rule book and doing all these things? They're so fabricated. Side note. I use this example all the time when I'm coaching women. So ladies, if your guy isn't filling up your calendar, he's not that into you. Because if a man likes you, he wants to spend all of his free time with you, all of it. And so don't settle for less. So then he said, well, I'm not much of a planner, but this is something we laugh about all the time. Okay, I was figuring you drive to my house, we'll grab some lunch, I'll drive to the stadium, we'll go back to our house, then you can drive home from there. And then on Tuesday, we'll take an Uber from my house. We'll say hi to my friend who runs the stadium. Then I'll get reservations at Arrogant Butcher. Then we'll have dinner there. Then we'll go to the concert. Then we'll take an Uber back to my house from there. Not much of a planner. Got it. We still laugh about it every single day. Every time we plan something, I'm a Capricorn. He's a Leo. We plan everything. He just never realized that he was a planner. He literally thought he wasn't a planner. It's so funny. I thought it was awesome. I was excited. I was super nervous. And I wanted a husband to plan dates and take care of all the details. It was on my list. More on that later, too. The 5 days between the text and the date could not have gone by any slower. John called me for the first time the next day, and it was the Wednesday before our Sunday Cardinals game date. And when he called, I was on the other line with my mom talking about him. He hung up before I could click over. So I called him back and he said, oh, he had just called to say hi because he was thinking about me. And he was taking some of his managers out. He was taking some of his managers out to lunch at Red Robin. I go, ew, gross. He said, I know, it's their choice, not mine. I said, yes, he's a food snob like me. I love it. Every night we talked on the phone for hours. We tried to get together earlier than that Sunday date, like for dinner or anything, but I could not find a last minute babysitter to save my life. By Saturday, I was already in love with him. I had rehearsal all day, and my friend Charles and I went to Circle K to get coffee first. He asked me if I wanted to get a donut, and I jokingly said, oh no, if I'm going to be a trophy wife, I can't eat donuts. Sunday finally came. I drove to John's house. He walked about a half mile from his house around the corner to the main street to flag me down so that I knew where to turn. Then he got into my car and we drove the rest of his way to his house together. And when we got into his truck, he opened my door. That was on my list too. He gave me a little awkward hug and he said, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. For 5 days. And I was such a wreck. So we went to lunch first. I dropped my purse on the floor. I dropped my sweater on the floor. I used both ends of my chopsticks. My napkin fell off my lap when I got up to go to the bathroom, only to find out that my shirt was totally pitted out. I don't usually wear t-shirts because I sweat, especially when I'm nervous, but I had bought a special Cardinals freaking t-shirt at Target just for this date. You know, it's real love when you have sweat stains in your armpits from being a nervous wreck, and he still thinks you're adorable. He first said, okay, I'm going to tell you some things that I've never told anyone else. Some not so good things, but everything that happened in my life led me to this moment right here with you. So I wouldn't change any of it. He literally said that to me on our first date. I was stunned. And he didn't play games. He doesn't know any of the games. So he really meant it. And then he opened up. He told me all kinds of things, difficult things in his past. And I did the same. And I just really promised myself that I would be myself and just tell the truth. Even if that meant we'd never date again, it was okay. If he didn't love the real me, I was just fine with that. He even prefaced one story with, okay, here's something that'll make you not want to be with me. And I just remember I'm just so done with the judging. You know, we only judge others when we haven't learned to love our flawed, beautiful selves. And since he was being vulnerable and honest with me, then it was a lot easier for me to do the same. And then he asked me if the age difference is going to be a problem. And I said with a cheesy grin, you mean the fact that I was born the year you graduated from high school? Nope. He was shocked. And he goes, how did you know that? He was new to Facebook. The stadium was about an hour away, but we were so lost in the conversation that we went on like 10 miles past the exit and added an additional 20 minutes to the drive. It was funny and awkward walking around in the crowds. I could tell that he wanted to hold my hand, but we'd been dating for about 90 minutes. So he instead, at first, he like grabbed my elbow, kind of steer me away from imminent danger. And that only lasted a few minutes. I could see an expression. He was just like, fuck it, and grabbed my hand. It still makes me laugh thinking about it. Our first kiss was during the game. The people behind us were like, can you just wait till the Cardinals score? And we're like, no. One of John's coworkers texted him and said, hey, how's it going? And John sent him a selfie. His coworker replies with 2 words, you're done. I remember seeing that. I was like, you're done? That's so crazy. That's so funny. We really didn't care about the game. Neither of us really care about football. But so we just left early and we just didn't want the date to end. So we talked the whole way there, talked the whole way back and to his house. We stopped to get dinner at Picazzo's and sat at the bar. And then we went back to his house. And I remember when we got off the exit towards Picazzo's, he goes, do you need anything? Do you want to go to Ulta? Do you need any makeup or anything? Like, no. That was the funniest thing anyone's ever asked me. And it was so sweet because he was trying to see if I needed anything, but he was trying to prolong the date. And he saw Ulta. He was like, maybe she needs some makeup. I just thought that was so adorable. That was so beautiful. I just laughed. I said, no, but thank you. He still doesn't remember saying that. We stopped at a restaurant. Oh, yeah. I just said that. We stopped at a restaurant and ordered dinner. We had a glass of wine and we talked and talked and talked and talked. And we went back to his house. I remember sitting on his couch with his iPad and he was showing me stuff. And I didn't want to leave. But finally, I dragged myself away and got in my car and went home. So the next morning, I casually mentioned that I should get a membership at his gym so we could work out together. And he said, oh, come on, let's go take care of that. I'm like, what? So I went to the dealership and he gave me a tour and introduced me to a few people that I hadn't met before, including one of his customers, also his friend, who was there for a service appointment. He introduced me to him and said, he goes, tell your wife that I'm not available anymore. To which I added, tell everyone. His friend's wife was always trying to set him up on dates. We drove straight to the gym, the Lifetime right around the corner from the dealership. And he signed me up on his account. But I was like, that's not what I meant. But we returned to the dealership and he opened the door and he goes, I love you, God damn it. I wasn't expecting to fall in love so fast. He was having difficulty believing it. He was almost like shocked that he actually said the words that came out of his mouth. And I already loved him too. And later he told me, you're not the kind of person you just date. You're the kind of woman that you marry. And he was correct. Side note, he failed to give the gym my address. And so my gym card went to his old house and his ex-wife got it. Whoopsie daisies. The next day we went to the Fleetwood Mac concert and he said, one of two things are going to happen. Either you decide we're better off as friends or you'll fall madly in love with me. To that I replied, it's too late. On the way home from the concert, he told the Uber driver that he was going to marry me in Maui. And a little more than a year later, he did just that. And we brought all 4 of our kids with us. We flew to Maui. We got married right on the sand, just the 6 of us. And the reason why I put our story in here, because I want you to know that this is real and it's possible for everybody. No matter what you've been through, no matter what your circumstances, no matter how old you are, no matter how much money you make, no matter where you live, no matter what you've been through. I married my best friend, someone I'd known and I'd worked with for 6 years before he even saw me. Well, he was married for most of it, but you know what I mean. I didn't even cross his mind until I'd transformed my beliefs and changed my focus to loving myself and relentlessly just improving the areas of my life that I wanted to improve. It wasn't until then that we got together. But let me be clear, it's not like I'd accomplished every single one of my goals and now I'm perfectly living a perfect life. We're just always a work in progress. I still had some IRS debt left, something I told him on the first date because that was something I was ashamed of. All of my circumstances were for the most part exactly the same. However, because I consistently worked toward my goals, my self-worth and mindset were different. I'd finally learned how to just feel okay being myself and just tell the truth. You don't have to have everything perfectly crossed off your list and have all of your goals accomplished to attract a partner that's perfect for you. Focusing on your progress and doing things that made you proud creates joy and makes you a magnet for love. John married me when my kids were 11 and 9, after he was literally done raising his own kids. And I spent years and years attracting teachers who taught me what I wanted and didn't want. I'd also attracted teachers who didn't enhance my life. And so I also know what not to do. And this is how I finally attracted true love. And you're next. That's the end of chapter 2. So meet me on the next video at chapter 3, which is the boss list.